All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for joining me for another one of the interviews on GaudiumEtSpes22.com blog and my YouTube channel of the same name. I have now today a repeat guest. I think, Zach, maybe this is the sixth, seventh, eighth interview between your podcast and mine that we've done together, which is only a sign of my respect for your thoughts and your opinions on the contemporary church. So I thank you for joining us once again. And so for those viewers that have not been introduced to Zach before, Zach runs it's still called Creedle, right? Your podcast
Creedle.
is still
Yep.
Creedle.
That's exactly right.
He runs the Creedle podcast, and he works for the Catholic app Hallow, correct?
That's
You
right.
haven't changed your job since I last spoke to you.
Have not. No, we're still building away at Hallow, trying to build.
And I hear great. By the way, let's start with that because maybe a lot of viewers are not aware of Hallow. What is Hallow, and why do you think everybody should join up with Hallow? I love Hallow.
Sure. Well, first of all, Larry, let me say thank you for having me on. We have had many conversations, and they've all been great. This is the first time I'm coming on your podcast, though. All of our conversations have been on my podcast.
On yours, yeah.
Which is, I'll throw that back at you. Definitely a sign of the respect that I have for you. I first discovered you just through Gaudium et Spes 22. I think someone had shared an article on Facebook and read it and thought, man, this Larry Chapp guy is really onto something. I should reach out and see if he'll do an interview. And lo and behold, we become good friends and have many conversations, and it's great. But coming onto your show is honestly a little bit intimidating, Larry, because you have, all these interviews with esteemed theologians and luminaries, Kel Zeldin and Rod Dreher, I think's been on, and Rodney Hauser, and recently David Bentley Hart. And then there's me, a little, young layman who's passionate about theology, but by no means a theologian, and just someone who likes talking about the church and has very particular thoughts about the church as a young, Catholic convert layman and father of young kids and all of that. But I definitely appreciate coming on. This is great.
Hey, I interview all kinds of people. The big names stand out, and I feel dwarfed and humbled when I interview them as well.
Fair enough.
But I've interviewed all kinds of people. So, and plus, don't sell yourself short. You're extremely intelligent and well versed in the things. But Hallow, what is Hallow?
Yes. So Hallow is the world's number one Catholic app in the world, which is crazy that it's had that kind of growth in the past almost 4 years since it started. But it is a little breviary in your pocket, a digital breviary that opens to you a world of Catholic prayer meditation in the form of audio guided and unguided prayers. So the brief founding story of Hallow, our founder, Alex Jones, not that Alex Jones.
The one who is now $1 billion in debt.
Correct.
Alex Jones.
Different Alex Jones. Alex went to undergrad at the University of Notre Dame, was raised Catholic, and he ended up falling away from his faith and sort of dabbling in atheism, really. He was in sort of a, high-functioning atheistic sort of stage eventually, where he found himself ending up, and then started engaging with philosophical arguments for the existence of God, and ended up through that journey, through that path, realizing I do believe there's a God, but how should I worship him? What is true about this God? What can we say is true about God? And so again, explored philosophy further, explored other religions as well, got really into sort of Eastern Zen Buddhist meditation.
Okay.
But over time, realized, oh no, actually, the Catholic Church of my faith is the church that Christ founded. This is the fullest expression of the truth that there is. This is the religious truth to which I can and should assent. And so he came back into the fold as a revert to the faith. But having been on this journey, realized as a revert, and as many reverts and converts are especially good at realizing, that there is just a world of richness to the faith that most Catholics within the fold and most non-Catholics outside the fold just don't even realize, don't even think about, don't even engage with. And one of those riches is contemplative and meditative prayer. And so in this journey, Alex found Zen Buddhist meditation, thought this is really cool, but then obviously becoming Catholic, he had to leave that behind because it's not about Christ. But he talked with priests and monks and sisters about this meditation and said, I really liked that. When I was not Catholic and I was kind of coming back into the fold, I was doing this sort of Eastern meditation. And they said, yeah, we have a word for something very similar to that we've been doing for a very long time, and it's called contemplative and meditative prayer. Let me teach it to you. So Alex So Alex is steeped in the Carmelite tradition of prayer meditation, and was inspired with his two friends who are the other co-founders, Eric and Alessandro, to build an app that helps Catholics do that. So you may have heard of apps like Headspace and Calm that are secular meditation apps. You open them up and
I
There's all
have
sorts
not
of
heard of them.
okay. I'm sure a lot of your listeners have. They're pretty common. They're kind of the leaders in this market space. But it's all about secular meditation, right? It's all about sort of self-centering. It's all about, in some
Yeah,
cases,
okay.
self-negation in this sort of Eastern tradition. It's not about contemplating
Like
the
yoga and stuff like that, you mean?
exactly.
Okay.
It's not about contemplating the riches of Christ, and so that's what Hallow is trying to do, and it's doing it very well. We're growing incredibly fast. We have over 4 million downloads to date, and my job at
Wow.
Hallow is to help Hallow expand internationally. So I first started working at Hallow a little bit over a year ago. At the time, we had content in English. Now we have content in English, Spanish, Portuguese, Polish, and Filipino, just as of 2 weeks ago. So we're expanding around the world very quickly. It's a super exciting project to be a part of. And our whole vision is more people praying. I mean, the more people pray every day, the happier we are, and that's what we're trying to do.
Isn't that the truth? I could
Yeah.
use that, which
Yeah,
is
right.
why
All of us could. Exactly.
So Alex Jones, the good Alex Jones,
Right.
started this. Okay. He started this. So how did he start it? I mean, I know this is not what we were going to talk about, but I'm just really curious about, in case anybody is out there is listening to, how do I start a Catholic app that's going to get 4 million downloads? Did he have a sponsor? Did he get an infusion of cash from somebody that helped him out? They should get some kudos here if they did.
Yeah, for sure. He did, and they should. The story is obviously a bit more complicated than that, but Alex was out of undergrad, was working at McKinsey, a big consulting firm, as was Eric as well, the second co-founder, or one of the other co-founders. And Alessandro, the third co-founder, was working in private equity. So all these guys were very sort of prestigious employment opportunities after graduating from Notre Dame. All of them went to Notre Dame together. Alex did several years at McKinsey, and then ended up at Stanford Business School doing an MBA. And while he was at Stanford is when he really sort of started pursuing this idea. Eric was at McKinsey in San Francisco at the same time, so they were in close proximity to each other. And so they decided to collaborate on this. They started with a kind of a friends and family seed round. They did the Kickstarter thing, put together a Kickstarter video that was, we kind of laugh at it today at the company because it was very rudimentary, but it adequately conveyed to at least enough people what Hallow was trying to be. They used that to raise some money from, what we might call a friends and family round, just really early backers of the project. They built out an MVP, minimum viable product of the app, something that worked and provided some level of value to customers. And then from there, we're able to do a seed round with investors who invested early on. And then from there, a Series A round and a Series B round. So as a company grows in size, early on, the startup path is that you do a seed round, and often preceded even by a friends and family round. That's for the earliest of early investors, right? And then a seed round. And a seed round is an opportunity for people with a little bit more capital, venture capital investors, for example, to come in and say, yeah, we'll give you $1 million and see what you can do with it. And of course, in exchange for the investment, you get those investors then own a certain percentage of your company's equity. Yeah. Series A follows from that, and Series B. So we're now a Series B company. We've raised a Series B rounds. And we've done it from, and I say we, this all happened before I got there, but we as in the company and the co-founders have done it from really prestigious companies in Silicon Valley who said, yeah, we'll give you our money to build this app. It sounds like a great mission. But the interesting thing is we haven't done it by being coy about our Catholicism. Alex and Eric and Alessandro have been very upfront that we're a Catholic app. We have Catholic values. We want to do Catholic things. And these investors who are, in many cases, secular, have said, okay, yeah, I'm on board with that. I think this is something that the world needs. The world needs more peace. And if this app is going to help the world have more peace, then that's good. And so we're very proud of that mission to help the world achieve peace. Very proud of the fact that people have been on board with it. And we've been able to convince people that this is really a good thing because we really believe that it is helping the world find peace in God. That's what we're all here to help people do with Hallow. So.
Well, that's fantastic. I'm glad that they were able to do this. And it obviously that's why I asked the question about seed money. It obviously takes a little bit of money because I remember when Hallow got launched, there was a lot of slick ads that came out and everything. The guy the actor who plays Jesus on The Chosen was pushing Hallow and
that's
stuff.
Right.
And, and that kind
Father
of
advertising.
Yeah.
John
so anyway,
Family.
That's, not exactly what I thought we were going to talk about, but it just popped into my head. That's why I don't like to script these things necessarily, because I really do think that, people know my shtick is universal call to holiness for the laity and a re-energized laity. So that's why I'm sort of all over this hallow thing, things that Word on Fire is doing, and so forth. That really, because I just think this kind of stuff is very important.
Yeah, I
My
could not agree with
wife's
you more. I
calling me.
think, yeah, that's fine. It is incredibly important, and I think we can get into some of this. I know we're going to talk about this
Yeah.
Ross Douthat article. We planned at least that much, Larry, but there, yeah, I think it is easy to sometimes dismiss the Second Vatican Council as having been a failure, that it didn't do what it set out to do. But
Yeah.
and we could talk more about that claim and sort of all the sort of assumptions baked into that claim and why people might make that claim and be perhaps partly justified in doing it. But I will say that from my vantage point, there's an awful lot of engagement of the laity. There's an awful lot of lay people out there in the Catholic Church who are saying, "I want to go deeper in my prayer life." And look, I'm too young to know from personal experience if that's more people or less people as a percentage of pew sitting Catholics than prior to the council. But it is exciting to see that there are these people out there. I'm not pretending that every single Catholic in the pew says, yeah, I want to go deeper. I really want to have a personal relationship. I want to be fired up about my faith. I want to know how to defend the faith. But there are a lot of them out there. And I think that number, in at least absolute terms, is growing.
There are, and I mean, to tie what we're talking about with hallow, universal call to holiness, to what we're talking with regard to Vatican II. All right, Ralph Stouthout had the article in the New York. He's the writer for the New York Times, religion guy, relatively conservative Catholic. He came out with an article like a couple weeks ago now, I guess, maybe last week or 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
I'm old, so everything runs together in my head. But he essentially said modern Catholics are trapped by Vatican II, and what he meant by that was, unlike some in the church who seem to think we can just ignore the council, let's go, it was a disaster, it was a failure, let's just act like it didn't exist and let's go back to the way things were before. He says you can't do that. I mean,
Yep.
whether you like it or not, it was an ecumenical council. It happened, it had effects. Those effects seem to be relatively permanent, at least in our lifetimes. On the other hand, it seems to have been, in many ways, a failure. It kind of has left us, therefore, in a no man's land, in between two different, combatants in their trenches. We're stuck out in the no man's land. So you can't go forward and you can't go backwards. I use an analogy in my Catholic World Report article on it, where I said it's like that. Vatican, what Douthat is saying is Vatican II is like that sofa, that giant sofa that you bought that's too large that you found out to come in through the front door, and so you leave it on the porch because you bought it with a no return policy. And so their Vatican II sits on our ecclesial front porch, and we don't really know what to do with it anymore. And my attitude is, and I'll get your thoughts on this, I really don't care anymore. Like you said, oh, I don't know if people before the council were praying more, had a thirst for prayer more than people after the council. I think I'm not alone in thinking I'm tired of asking such questions.
Mm-hmm.
What was it like before the council? What's it like after the council in terms of prayer? There were people before the council who wanted to pray, and there were people before the council who didn't want to pray.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same thing now. What are the percentages? Who knows? Who cares? We know, all right, that one of the things that the council did call for was the universal call to holiness. And we also further know that there are millions of Catholics out there right now who want to take that seriously,
Yeah.
and who do want to deepen their prayer life. So, I mean, would you agree with that assessment? In one sense, I'm tired of these conversations. I don't really care anymore. On the other hand, I do care deeply. It's a strange admixture of sort of conflicting feelings.
Yeah, that does resonate with me, at least to some degree, Larry. I think for me, it's less a matter of sort of this admixture of sort of apathy and interest. I think it's more that I need to sort of catch myself and stop myself from asking what I think are the wrong questions. And maybe I can circle back to that in a second. But I think
this is key. This is key. That's exactly where I was heading with this. Okay. That we're not asking the right questions, which is why the conversation has become tiresome and tedious.
Mm-hmm. Well, this Douthat piece, which I think is very, very good. I don't agree with it entirely, but I think it's very good and worth reading if you're interested in these questions about Vatican II. Douthat makes basically three claims. He says the first claim is that the council was necessary. And what he means by that is not that he sort of wholesale buys into the, hey, we have to sort of open up the doors of the church to the world and let the fresh air in. He's not saying that necessarily.
Right.
What he's saying is that on the one hand, there was some staleness. The church was sort of stagnating, and it didn't have enough to say to the secular culture. And on the other hand, outside of the church, a ton of things were advancing. Technocracy, rampant secularism throughout Europe, et cetera, et cetera. Protestantism in Latin America. He mentions all these things. And so something was necessary. Something had to be done. I think I agree with him. As far as I understand the sort of milieu of the time, I think that's right. The second thing he says is that the council was a failure. And he basically says that's the case because it didn't achieve what it set out to do for anybody who's concerned. I mean, you can find the sort of liberals, the theological liberals who defend Vatican II and the sort of nebulous spirit of Vatican II, who even acknowledge, yeah, we haven't been totally successful in, sort of remaking the church in our image. And the trads who say this is obviously an abject failure because look at all this sort of rampant theological progressivism that it has enabled. So Dowtha says it's a failure. That's I think the sort of main point that I take issue with, and I suspect you probably are more in line with my thinking on that, Larry. And then the third one is, sorry, just to finish his third point, is that we can't go back. That's what he says, right? Like it's done, so we've just got to move on. I think that's right. I think that's fair. I mean, this is an ecumenical council. We cannot roll back the clock on an ecumenical council, regardless of how much any sort of sidewalk rad-trad may want to. We can't erase what the council has done, and so we're stuck with it. Whether or not that's a good or bad thing will depend on sort of your perspective on the other 2 points that Dowtha makes. But going back to his point that it has failed, I remember you and I talking probably almost a year ago now, Larry, maybe even more than a year ago, about the hermeneutic of continuity. And the question we had asked was, has the hermeneutic of continuity failed? Did what John Paul II and Benedict XVI try to do, in sort of and Dowtha talks about this as well, in sort of trying to right the ship post Vatican II, trying to provide an authoritative interpretation of the council and her documents in light of the timeless magisterium of the church? Has that failed? Because now Pope Francis comes in, and he has really been, by pretty much any account, I think, pursuing this sort of hermeneutic of rupture, that there really was a genuine change, that we should sort of remake the church in light of this genuine change and open the doors and let all the fresh air of the world in. I'm being a little bit flippant there, but that's basically the argument.
I don't think that's flippant at all. I think it's spot on and completely accurate as to what the current papacy wants to do.
But what we had said in our previous conversation was, has it failed? Well, no, it hasn't failed, but it also hasn't succeeded yet. And I think that's where Dowtha gets this wrong. I mean, I think to look at this 60 years hence after the council and say, wow, what an abject failure that is really to take such a myopic view of not just ecclesial history, but of the way that the Holy Spirit has worked through history. And I think we just do ourselves a great disservice to already call something a failure. And second, I think theologically, it's problematic to call what the Holy Spirit has done a failure, because there is no failure in God's work. The Holy Spirit does not fail. And so to say that the Holy Spirit has failed, or the Vatican, the Second Vatican Council, which is prompted by the Holy Spirit, has failed, is, I think, pretty dangerous theological territory to get in. Much better, I think, to say, look, I don't like where we are right now. And I don't like the way it looks like the Second Vatican Council has enabled a lot of that. But I don't need to like it. And I don't need to understand exactly how God is working through the Second Vatican Council. Much better for me to work towards the renewal of the church that the council called for, to pursue the life of the Catholic in line with this hermeneutic of continuity, to pursue the life of evangelization to which I'm called as a lay Catholic, and to live the universal call to holiness, which the Second Vatican Council encourages me to do. That's what I am interested in doing. I mean, and yes, I do like to get sort of caught up in these sort of scandal-ridden questions about, the same ones Dowtha's asking here. But I think those are the wrong questions to ask, because I don't find them particularly helpful. I don't find them particularly compelling, et cetera, et cetera. So
that's why I said I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
I'm tired of the stylized manner in which all of this has proceeded. You've got what the church was like before, what it was like after. Therefore, the council caused what came after, and then the other side of the equation, this romanticization of the council,
right.
That it had absolutely no flaws, nothing wrong with it, and so on. The proper question to ask is, what were the central aims of the council, and or are those central aims of the council of the Holy Spirit? And in
Mhm.
that regard, do they pertain to the universal life of the church? And do they articulate truths that are applicable at all times in all places for the church, whether you were to go back 1,000 years or ahead 1,000 years?
Right.
Is what the Vatican Council said, is it true? Is it theologically profound? Does it advance deeper understanding of Catholic theology and practice? Yes, yes, and yes. And then my last article in the Catholic Report, that's how I conclude. This
Hmm.
council was a theological event. The tradies misconstrue it all the time. It was a pastoral council. Therefore, we're justified in rejecting the
Yep.
thing.
Yep.
Just like Lateran V was a pastoral council, a reform council, and it failed. So Vatican II failed. So well, Lateran V didn't fail. The pastoral result was not what it wanted, but the truths it articulated are still true today. And
Yes.
that is also true of the Second Vatican Council. And it has not been a failure in the sense that the council is to blame for what came. It's like saying the best calculus teacher in the entire history of the world. Not that the Vatican Council is necessarily the best council in the history of the world,
Right.
but you get the analogy, right?
Yep.
The best calculus teacher in the whole history of the world walks into a high school calculus class, spends a semester teaching students calculus in the most brilliant way imaginable, and every single one of his students fails the class because they're
Mm.
suffering from lead poisoning. Okay, is the lead poisoning therefore the fault of the teaching and the professor?
Right.
No, and this is the problem. All right, in Western culture over the past century, you've seen a decline in religiosity across the board,
That's right.
across all religious denominations, Christian and religion, Judaism, Christianity, whatever, in the West has been in
Hmm.
decline for 100 years. Furthermore, when you see uh, peoples from other religious cultures, be it Hindu or Islamic, come to the United States, just as we saw with like Catholic immigrants, they maintain their Hinduism and their Islam for one or two generations.
Hmm.
But before long, the corrosive nature of modern secularity, all of a sudden the kids are all out there, you know, doing the secular thing, walking away from their faith. This is what Western culture does to religiosity.
That's right.
And my contention is, even if there had never been a Second Vatican Council, you would have seen a decline in the Catholic faith, uh, almost as severe, if not perhaps more severe than what we have seen over the past 60 years. Because the idea that the Latin Mass and Garrigou-Lagrange were going to hold off this tsunami, this cultural tsunami that washed over everything in the 60s and the 70s is patently absurd. And you see this in Eastern Orthodoxy has a beautiful liturgy, and yet they've hemorrhaged people in Western culture as well. And so I just find these narratives of failure, and doubt that unfortunately falls into this. Right? It was a pastoral council. What came after was a pastoral disaster. Ergo, the council failed in its stated aims. Except that ignores the fact that one of the primary ways that the council perceived itself as pastoral was in theological renewal. It wasn't just about the nuts and bolts of this, that, or the other thing in the church. It was about changing the church's sort of theological language and theological outlook. And in that sense, it was a resounding success as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more, especially on that point. I like your juxtaposition of your sort of suggestion of a counterfactual, right? What if the council had not happened? Would we see more people in the pews now? And I think juxtaposing Catholicism with Orthodoxy is smart there because there was no Second Vatican Council in Orthodoxy, and they have seen the same, if not more dramatic, decline in overall numbers.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so it's not just simply as it's not as simple as, hey, if we just have really good liturgy, people will stick around. Liturgy is
And you're
important.
seeing the same phenomena too. There was a brief surge. Everybody always pointed to the conservative evangelical Protestants.
Yep.
Oh, look how they're surging. Well, they're on the decline now as
Yeah.
well.
Well, I also have an interesting perspective on this, given that I was raised as an evangelical Protestant, an Anglican, but like a evangelical, pretty Protestant flavor of Anglican, and I was raised homeschooled. And I saw a survey, or I saw a news article about a survey a couple weeks ago that surveyed a ton of homeschool children, previously homeschooled children, and I think alongside public school children, whatever. One of the findings of the survey was that if you were raised as a homeschooler, you are more likely than your public school kin to now identify as some sort of, non-heteronormative sexuality, right? So some sort of bisexuality or trans, et cetera, some LGBTQ flavor.
Right.
That was interesting to me. And I think it shows that not even the most sort of conservative structures are immune from the onward advancement of secularism. And so in the same way, the Catholic Church has fallen victim to the same exact types of thing. And how, we can't possibly know if it would have been worse without Vatican II. We know how bad it is now, and it's pretty bad, right? But we can't say if it would have been worse without Vatican II. This is a cultural problem that is posing problems for religion everywhere, and it's really bad everywhere. It's a bloodbath. It's a bloodbath out there.
I mean, the fact is, it is a bloodbath, and the fact is, the council did act as a kind of catalyst. It acted as a kind of accelerant.
Mm-hmm.
Nevertheless, it as an accelerant, it was simply tossing fuel onto combustibles that were already there. I mean, something has to explain sociologically. If the cause of the demise of Catholicism in the West over the past 60 years was the council, something has to explain why, in a mere 3 short years, a meeting of bishops in Rome could cause the entire culture of Catholicism in the West to simply collapse and fall apart seemingly overnight.
Yep.
What that points to is that there were already deep weaknesses in pre-conciliar Catholicism.
Yes. Well, we've talked about this previously, how
Yeah.
many of the priests, the vast majority of the priests, in fact, who were exposed as serial pedophiles and sexual criminals in the 90s and 2000s. Really, in the 2000s was the sort of expose, the expository work, but those priests had committed those things in the 70s, 80s, and 90s. They're formed in the pre-Vatican II world. So yeah, there were deep cracks in the foundation.
Not to mention
already.
the fact that even now in the contemporary church, the dirty little secret, for example, of the SSPX, the Lefebvrites, is the priestly sex abuse in their ranks. Okay, and the idea that if you're a traditional Catholic, that these things are not going to afflict you or bother you is crazy. I mean, one of my closest friends from my seminary years, Father James Jackson, was a big mucky muck in the FSSP movement, the Fraternity of St. Peter, Latin Mass people. And he hasn't been proven guilty, but he was arrested for trafficking in child pornography.
It's terrible. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm hoping and praying that Jim is innocent, that he's proven innocent. I don't know, but he was arrested for that.
Yeah.
And there does seem to be some evidence, but anyway, I don't want to dwell on that. The point is
it's
that
everywhere. Yeah, it's everywhere.
It goes back to our original insight here. I'm really just completely tired of these arguments from the progressive side, that the council was really about this massive rupture, and that was interrupted by the horribleness that was John Paul and Benedict. Now we finally have a pope that gets it, and we can start the rupture, the revolution all over again, which, by the way, and I want to talk about this, in my opinion, that's what the whole synodal path is meant to do. It's a way to get sort of Vatican III in through the back door, if you ask me, and just not calling it that.
Yeah.
And I'm tired of that narrative, and I'm tired of the traddy narrative of, well, everything was great before the council, and then it got terrible after the council, ergo it was the council's fault. Well, everything was not great before the council. And the causes of the decline were multifocal. And it is just sociologically unbelievably superficial and naive in the extreme, especially when you engage in an analysis of a sociological comparative religious analysis, to say that the council is what caused the decline of Catholicism in Western culture. It's just patent nonsense. So that, to me, the proper question then to ask about the Second Vatican Council, for a lot of younger people, your generation, this is something way in your rearview mirror. It's the equivalent for your generation what my parents talking about Franklin Roosevelt was to me, growing up. And yet, even as a young man, I could appreciate, well, Franklin Roosevelt was important and he did some great things. I don't really give two figs about Franklin Roosevelt, but he did, and that's what I would like to say to young people out there who say, why should I care about my grandfather's counsel? You should care because you are living the fruit and the benefits of that counsel, whether you realize it or not. Also, perhaps some of the negative side effects of the counsel. I don't know, but it's still there, and it still does affect us, and therefore it's got to be contended with. And the right question, therefore, to ask is this: what were the perennial truths that the council taught, and how did it deepen those truths? Because to me, that's the lasting legacy of the council. How did it deepen the perennial truths of the faith? And it did so through a Christocentric concentration, which is why I call 22. That's why I call my blog Gaudium et Spes 22. It is the paragraph in Gaudium et Spes, Church in the Modern World, that John Paul II quoted over and over and over again in every single one of his encyclicals. Yep. It's only in the light of Christ that the mystery of man takes on its full meaning.
Yeah,
and that might seem just like, you hear that, it's like water off a duck's back. Oh yeah, Christ. Yeah, he's important. We get. No, you don't understand. This is what is so angering about people who say, oh, the council didn't really advance any new ideas. People need to understand, yes, of course, the church always believed in Christ and advanced Christ and so on, but never before in the history of councils had an ecumenical council articulated such a Christocentric hermeneutic, essentially saying that everything from our theology of revelation to our ecclesiology, to our sacramentology, to our anthropology, everything has to be grounded in a profound understanding of the cruciform Christ.
That's right.
That's the essence of everything. And believe it or not, despite the church's emphasis on Christ, that was not always the central doctrinal theological formulation of things. Anyway, I don't want to get too academic here, but
I think it's a very good point. I think to me the right question. I think you asked the question in a more specific way. What I was going to say is the right question is what is the Holy Spirit doing here? Because if we accept that this is of the Holy Spirit, we say, look, I don't understand it. And there are some things that look like the fruits of it that aren't great, but I know that God cannot fail. I know that God's purposes never fail. And so what is he doing? And one of those ways to get at the answer to that question is to say, what did the council actually teach? What is the enduring fruit here? And how can we live that more closely? And so I think your personal apostolate running Gaudium et Spes is a great example of that. And you're right. I think some people can dismiss this as sort of trite, but it's obviously not. This is actually the most comprehensive truth in all of existence, and that is that everything revolves around Jesus Christ and him crucified.
Yes.
And that is the profound teaching of the Second Vatican Council that we should all get behind. Now, to your point about being tired of the dialogue, I also tire of this dialogue, but I will say I have much more sympathy, and maybe this is not good, but I have much more sympathy for the trad side of this equation that is trying to get back at that, trying to recover that, than the other side of the equation that often makes me look at them and say, do you even believe any of it? Do you believe Jesus is real at all? Because the sort of rad trads, they ruffle feathers and they want to get back to this, sort of mythical church that never quite existed, I think. And there's sort of like this well-meaning naivety, even if it's sort of wrapped up in sort of trollishness sometimes. And, maybe I'll get some hate mail for saying it like that. But that's
true, and that's my issue with them.
Yeah. But on the other side is just people who I'll be honest, Larry, it's very hard for me to look charitably at some of these people, especially the clerics, because they should know way better.
Yeah.
And I just look at them, and it's what we've said before, but it's de facto atheism. I just look at their actions and think, what? I cannot believe that you take seriously the incarnation, the death, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Because if you did, there's no way that you would be off, doing these things and saying these things.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's symmetrical. I mean, if you were to do a study of my 80 or 90 blog posts over the course of the past 3 years, the essays against progressive Catholics versus my criticism of the trads, the anti-progressive essays would outnumber the trad ones 10-1, 8-1, whatever. My problem with the traditionalists is that they're their own worst enemy, because I did begin initially being very sympathetic with their cause, saying, one can understand their anger, for crying out loud.
Sure.
And yet the loudest dogs barking in their kennels can be quite vicious. and actually go after and engage in vicious attacks against people that are doing excellent work in the church, like Bishop Robert Barron. For some reason, he's their bête noire. For some reason, they all hate his guts. All right, that stupid Bishop Barron, and I just throw him up there as an example because I know Robert Barron and I like him, and I just think it's a shame that the trads feel a need to trash good people. It's like, unless, I mean, I even read recently a traditionalist critique of Fulton Sheen on the grounds that Fulton Sheen accepted the Novus Ordo.
Wow,
and therefore, how dare he abandon tradition? Mr. Tradition himself, Fulton Sheen, embraced the Novus Ordo. So even he went squishy and soft in his old age. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. Well, that doesn't do anybody any good.
There's an analog here, Larry, in that the sort of as you go to the extremes, we can call it wokeism. Obviously, rad tradism is something different, but the dynamics are the same, and there just becomes an ideological purity test, right? And the farther out you go, the more stringent the purity test becomes. And so, in the same way that J.K. Rowling is getting canceled because despite absolutely affirming the personhood of trans people, she says a trans woman or a self-identified trans woman is not the same as a biological woman, and she gets canceled for that, and people burn Harry Potter books over that, because she sort of fails the ideological purity test in that way. And so in the same way, Fulton Sheen does all these great, wonderful things, really, I think, better than anyone in the last 200 years, engages at a popular level with the gospel and helps people engage with it. He accepted the Novus Ordo, therefore he fails the purity test, and he must be banned. It's absurd.
I mean, but on the other hand, okay, so I'll take it all back now. So stop.
Sure.
I get 100 hate mails from the trads every day, every time I say something like that. All right. I love you. All right. Yeah. Kissy, kissy. I love all the trads. Okay. I'm more on your side than on the progressives. All right, fine. And they also don't like me now because I went all squishy with David Hart and sort of talked about universalism, and I lean in that direction. Okay. Oh yeah. I'm a heretic now. But anyway, the point is, their concerns are. I was just talking to a priest friend of mine today. I won't say who or where. I don't want to get him in trouble, but he's a well-known priest who just had a conversation with his bishop, and he wanted to put altar rails up in his church, and the bishop said no.
Ridiculous.
No, can't do that because that's anti-Vatican II or whatever.
Ridiculous.
And also, then the bishop then sort of asked him about why. Well, maybe I shouldn't add this. This might be too much of an identifier.
Fair enough.
So, and if his bishop happens to get a hold of this video, then maybe there are a lot of bishops who have denied altar rails.
Yes.
But this one is a little more specific. But anyway, you get my point. So you're right. When you look at the progressives, you say to yourself, the second example would have been something that would cause you to go back to what you said before. I wonder if these people believe anything at all. Mm-hmm. It had to do with the Eucharist, and this is the thing that I find most troubling about progressives in the church, and how they actually then derailed the council, is that it's a de facto atheism. There's no doubt about it. They don't believe a damn thing, which is why they're obsessed with sex and issues of sexuality. Does anybody really believe that the Germans believe anything anymore? I mean, their synodal way, what have they been talking about incessantly? Nonstop. Yep. Gender and sex. Where is, the Vatican came out with something about the synod on the synod, some long thing. Oh, the synod is going to be, the word Jesus or Christ was mentioned once in the entire document. Yep. The rest of the document was filled with all kinds of buzzwords about dialogue and openness, and God is doing a new thing. And, and so we're justified in wondering, what the heck is going on here? What is synodality? What's it all about? So the trads have a point. But to bring it back to the Douthat article and the idea of the failure of Vatican II and all that, my problem with traditionalism is that in going all scorched earth against Vatican II, we're going to be losing some treasures, as you mentioned, the Holy Spirit moving here. There were definite theological treasures embedded in the Second Vatican Council.
Yeah.
Dei Verbum in its analysis of Revelation, which was a Christocentric analysis of revelation. Instead of treating revelation as a couple of sets of data streams, there's a scripture data stream and a tradition data stream, and we get all this data and bits of little factoid nuggets of God knowledge that's coming to us, all right, in Revelation. Now, that's obviously I'm making fun of spoofing, I'm a caricature, but really, I mean, it was this overly propositional, deductive sense, which is actually a very modern concept of truth. A sort of enlightenment vision of truth is a set of Archimedean objectivity, a fact value distinction, and all that. And it's a shame that sort of post-Tridentine Catholicism, in reacting against the Enlightenment, kind of adopts its own methodology of developing truth. Well, Dave Verboom comes along and says, okay, we're not going to deny the propositional quality of doctrines. There is truth content in doctrines that is propositional. Right. In other words, it's a sentence that makes sense and it's got an idea in it that's true. Okay. And we're not denying that. But ultimately, you cannot treat doctrines as little disconnected nuggets, factoids about God, deep thoughts about God, you know, and little things out of a fortune cookie.
These are great little parodies that you're doing here.
I'm reverting back to my teaching days where my students said I missed my calling as a sort of mimic or whatever. But anyway, the point is the council grounded revelation Christologically and said you've got to look at all doctrines and you've got to reduce them to Christ and reduce them to the mystery of the incarnation. And to realize that all doctrines are pointing towards a mystery, and to go back to what we were saying at the very beginning, therefore, towards a mystagogy, that doctrines are meant to spur us on to contemplation, to spur us on to prayer, not to just give us some little piece of ammunition that we can shoot out of a Gatling gun and apologetic. Take that, evangelicals.
That's the dream. That's the
dream. You know, Catholic apologetics, sort of Gatling gun style.
Right.
You were an evangelical. You saw the evangelicals do that with scripture verses.
For sure.
John 27:22. They're shooting at you with these like. You remember Jack Van Impe? By any chance?
Who's that?
No, Jack Van Impe was, this is way off topic, but that just popped into my head. Jack Van Impe was an evangelical dispensationalist, end of the world Bible prophecy guy. He had a TV show for decades. It's called Jack Van Impe Presents. But that's the way he was. He would toss out scripture verses. He wouldn't read them. He would just say, you know, John 12:22, that goes with Daniel. And you have to write them down real fast and you have to look it up in your Bible. And when you looked it up, you realize, well, that doesn't say anything that remotely comparing to what he said. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. I just want to go back to the fact that that because most people are not theologians, I don't think they can grasp deeply the deep theological truths that the Second Vatican Council contained. And I just articulated one in Dave Verboom. Lumen Gentium had others. Opening section of Lumen Gentium on the church begins to discuss the church as a sacrament. Okay, as a sacrament. And much is made of the primary metaphor in Lumen Gentium of the church as the people of God. People criticize that on the grounds that it was incorrectly interpreted in these egalitarian, democratic, Protestant ways. And it was, and that was unfortunate, but that's not what the council meant. Right. The council meant that you needed to interpret Christian life in the church eschatologically, that we are sojourners, that none of us are ever completely at home as Christians in this world, that we have dual citizenship in this world and in the kingdom to come. And that has to be the mark of every single genuine Christian existence. Unfortunately, now in the synodal way, it's like, hey, we're a church on the move. You know, What does that even mean? We're a church on the move. For crying out loud, on the move where? It's like a church on the move. Well, as long as we're moving, I guess that's a good thing, because I guess not moving is a bad thing. But anyway, I'm really on a rant now. What are your thoughts on sort of like because my point is this, let's nutshell it here. Vatican II was a theological council really for theologians. Forget all this stuff about it was a pastoral council or whatever. It was a theological event put forward by theologians and appreciated by theologians, which is why it was easily co-opted by crazy theologians.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'm going to go back to my my trad comments as well, and I know you sort of backtracked a little bit and explained what you thought of the trads. The only clarifying comment I will make to what I've already said is that, maybe not the only comment, but the one comment I'll make is that I identify as a trad, Larry. I'm not a rad trad, but I think every Catholic should be a trad, because we should
I'm a trad in that sense. Yes.
We should recognize the value of tradition. We should prioritize tradition. We should certainly recognize the divine source of sacred tradition. So every Catholic should be a trad. I'm definitely a trad. And as a trad, you can recognize, I think, the aesthetic superiority of the Latin Mass. You cannot proclaim the objective superiority of the Latin Mass, you know? You can point out that church architecture has gone way downhill since the Second Vatican Council. And I would agree with you and say that's, you know, just as much a fruit of the sort of secular age in which we live, and our industrial age, and the general turn of all architecture since the 1940s.
Brutal, you know, the architectural brutalism.
Exactly.
Awful. But that, by the way, was a trend that started before the council.
Of course.
Go back and look at some of these Catholic churches built in the 50s that are absolutely...
It's post World War II. That's what it was. I mean, the Marshall Plan's rebuilding Europe, and it's doing so with brutalist architecture and you know, fitting of East Germany, for example. But you know, you can take issue with things that the Pope is saying and doing, and you should pray for the Pope always. But you cannot just call him, you know, Bergoglio, like he's not actually the Holy Father. You know, he is the Holy Father.
Yeah, or call him a formal immaterial heretic.
Sure, you can do all of that. But he is the Holy Father. He's you know, the seat is not vacant. We're not seat of vacantists here. You know, he can say and do problematic things, but he's the Holy Father. Saying the Holy Father, by the way, is not some sort of indication of the Pope's sanctity. It's recognizing that he is the person who is currently the vicar of Christ, the shepherd of the Holy Church, which, by the way, also exists under a dual aspect, being human and therefore sinful, and also divine, therefore sinless. So it's a statement of, you know, the Holy Church that he is leading, not his personal sanctity. Which, by the way, you know, I know very little about, as someone who is not the discerner of hearts, like God is. So, you know, you can do those things and you cannot do the other things, and so that's where I sort of draw the line between a trad and a rad trad. But I'm a trad. You know, I like the Latin Mass. I like good music in my Mass. And, you know, call me old-fashioned, Larry, but I like a priest who believes the words of consecration when he says them, you know?
Yeah, that's always helpful.
Always helpful.
I find. Oh,
yeah,
absolutely. So that's go ahead.
No, please continue.
No, I just think that I mean, that's a great caveat that you throw in there, because I'm tossing the word trad around as a shorthand for a certain kind of traditionalist that I don't hate or despise, and I'm kind of glad they're there. I just have real issues with their scorched earthness towards so many things. Which I think is just more a reactive sort of thing. But you're right. I mean, as a communio ressourcement theologian, I'm obviously a traditionalist, because the whole communio resource movement is about going back to the sources of revelation. In other words, tradition, going back to a renewed patristics, a renewed scripture scholarship, even a renewal of Aquinas and so on. Absolutely. So I'm a trad in that regard too. And as you correctly point out, all Catholics have to be traditionalists. I mean, my goodness, of course we are. I mean, because the essence of the incarnation is that God took on the vulnerability of carnality. All right. I was just reading a great article today in Communio by Jennifer Martin of Notre Dame on the French poet Charles Péguy. And I highly recommend. It's in this issue of Communal Mediation, it's called, and the name of the article is "The Annunciation of the Annunciation of the Flesh," and it's just an absolutely stunning analysis of Peggy's essentially poetic meditation on the incarnation as God's vulnerability in submitting his revelation to us to the mediation, not just of a human life, a single human life, but the realization that single human life's significance and memory is now going to be also entering into the vulnerability of the mediation of history, the mediation of tradition, which has to be vouchsafed by the Holy Spirit because of the vicissitudes of things. So in other words, to be a Christian, not forget Catholic, to be a Christian is to submit yourself in faith to the very concept of material historical mediation of God's revelation. We're not illuminationists. We're not Gnostics.
Mm-hmm.
Truth comes to us through our senses, through the sacraments, through
Faith
this
comes
tradition.
through hearing. Yeah.
So absolutely, a Catholic must be a traditionalist of some sort or another. But my contention would be that the tradition has to be understood, once again, asking the right questions, has to be understood deeply and profoundly, and not in these wooden categories where certain aspects of the tradition are freeze-framed in time, then essentialized and ahistoricized and elevated, and then weaponized, all right, against the modern church, against the council, against any innovation after the syllabus of errors and Pascendi and Pius X. I know the radical tradition, for example, that think Pius XII was a little squishy, because after all, he introduced the first liturgical reforms in 1955. So you've got the radical traditionists that say, the best liturgy is the one before Pius XII started tinkering around with it. Once again, okay, I'm getting way off topic. I didn't want this whole episode to be a long rant, but it's on my mind. You should see my email box. So I apologize to my viewers. I apologize to my more traditionalist viewers. I'm not normally this edgy, but you start to get a little thin-skinned after a while. I need to stop opening my emails, I guess.
No worries at all. No worries at all. But back to the synod. You had asked me about the synod. I mean, the you've seen, you have to have seen this, Larry, the official art of the synod from the Vatican, right? The synod 2021.
Yeah, I wrote a Catholic Road Report article, or a register. I don't know which one.
Okay.
Now.
Yeah, I when I first saw this last year, it was on Twitter, and no joke, I think it was, I don't know, some trad Catholic like myself had shared this and just was sort of mocking it. And I was thinking, this has to be fake. This cannot be real. This is like clip art. Like someone opened up Microsoft Paint and they wrote with, Comic Sans, which is that like preschool font that preschool teachers, use to make announcements about PTA meeting later that week or whatever. It's like, this cannot be real. And lo and behold, I go to the official Vatican
and it's
website.
real. It's real, from Philadelphia. The artwork is from Philadelphia.
It's so
and when I first saw it, I thought it was maybe something from the Babylon Bee, because I thought the same thing. There's a woman dressed like a priest. There's a guy in a pride shirt, and then of course the art is what I would call 1970s primitivism. I mean, those of us who lived through the 70s. Let me tell you, one of the first things that struck me, and you ask anybody, say, I was born in 58, in the 60s or whatever, and spent their formative years, high school or whatever, in the 70s. What really leapt off the page when I looked at that art was, dear Lord in heaven, where's the rotary phone on the wall? Because this is really, it really is a return of us. And my point is that I don't think that was an accident.
Oh, no.
I think it's a deliberate calling up and it's not just that one piece of art. Have you noticed, Zach, that all of the artwork that's been put out, whether you're talking the Deutsche Synodic Weg or the Rome, it's all this kind of felt banner.
Yes, of course.
Old-fashioned ditto machine art.
Yep. I can, I don't know if you can enable screen sharing on this Zoom that we could show your listeners, but I have some of this stuff pulled up. And if you enable,
let me put it. Okay, share screen. If I click this and we lose this, I'm gonna remember I'm a complete Luddite. So here we go.
You should be able to enable it. Just when I'm
multiple
trying to share,
participants can share simultaneously. Okay.
Mine just says host disabled. Oh wait, now I can share. Okay, here we go.
Okay, let's
see. All right, so I was talking about something different. So I was talking about the official logo, Larry.
Oh, you weren't talking about the Philadelphia thing. Oh, you're talking about this.
Here, I was talking about this up here. This is the official synod logo, theme, art, whatever, from the Vatican. I mean, the Vatican, the largest owner of sacred art in the world. You've been to the Vatican, Larry. I mean, this is what they come up with for their vision for a church that is walking.
Forget
together.
Raphael, forget Caravaggio.
It's so ridiculous.
When you've got that up there on the screen.
It's so ridiculous.
And this is the document I was talking about that doesn't mention Jesus or Christ
right.
anywhere, but there's all kinds of stuff about walking in the Spirit and whatnot.
Here we go. This is just rich stuff. This is just, get this person a Nobel laureate in poetry. We recall that the purpose of the synod is not to produce documents, but to plant dreams, draw forth prophecies and visions, allow hope to flourish, inspire trust, bind up wounds, weave together relationships, awaken a dawn of hope, learn from one another, and create a bright resourcefulness that will enlighten minds, warm hearts, give strength to our hands. That is one of the largest piles of drivel I have ever read in sequence.
That's Larry. 1,000 island word salad right there.
It's amazing. And then the art you were talking about. Here we go. Synod.va, the official Vatican account. Well,
yeah, right there. That's the one I'm talking about. Well, yeah, the woman priest, the guy with the pride shirt.
I mean,
yeah.
What is happening? And then
that's I mean, and it's just such stylized 1970s kind of felt banner art. I mean, yeah, look at the dude's. He's got elephantitis in his left leg there.
Yeah, what's going on there?
Yeah.
I mean, we've got the anchor in the gospel, but it's actually sort of crushing the Bible. It appears. It's a strange artistic choice.
Yeah,
and we have diversity and liturgy growing on the same choral, which is
that's right. Diversity and liturgy. Yeah. I see the word obligation down there.
Oh, I guess like the Sunday obligation, perhaps.
Well, no, they'd never mention that. But look, on the green algae plant, seaweed plant, accompaniment, active listening, challenge, ask questions and challenge. Something
this
growth.
might say confess and grow. So that'd be, a little mention of the sacrament of confession there, perhaps. Okay.
I don't think they're talking about confession there. Confess and grow. That probably just means talking to your buddies while toking some weed, watching your lava. This is the 70s, so watching your lava lamp while you're high on some weed, so you confess your sins to your buddy.
Church can be a refuge. I mean, this is just this is liberation theology right here.
Look at that.
Yeah. Amazing.
Oh, thank God! You're Mr. Techie here, and I should interview him. I got to learn how to do all this cool stuff.
How about this term deep care? Look at that.
Deep care.
Why? I mean, this is just really. There's of course you got to get the identity stuff.
Radical hospitality, LGBTQ plus identity, dialogue, but gospel.
Undergirding it all, reckless. We got to be reckless, Larry.
Reckless. Yeah. They should put a W in front of that R.
Reckless.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we've got this one. What is this? Are these bookmarks or is this a weaving? What's happening here? And we've got
that's a good question. So what is that?
There's no Greek nor Jew in Christ, but there is the parish church, the black church, the Asian church, the Latino church, the white church, the college church,
the LGBTQ LGBTQ community church thingy. Right. And notice that there's guitars in the background. Yes, of course. Now there is a monstrance with the host in it.
Yep.
So I don't know why.
But to your point about Christocentric view, notice it's in the margins. It's off to the side.
Yeah. Underneath all the identity markers. Notice what is, to get serious here now, what's really telling about this, of course, is that what is foregrounded, what is in the center is identity politics. That now we're breaking the church up into these various identity groups. Now, it's absolutely true. There is such a thing as enculturation, and the church is, multinational, multi-ethnic, multi-racial, and all that. And the immigrant church in the United States was at one time busted up into Irish and French and Polish and all that stuff. But that was really in some ways a bad thing.
I mean, it's called philotism, right? We have a word for that, and it's not a good thing. So.
Yeah, it's not a good. It was good in one sense, is it gave immigrants a linguistic home and a cultural home as they transitioned, and it helped to support one another. But it also created vicious animosities between, the Lithuanian parish versus the Polish parish, the French parish versus the Irish, and so on. And it wasn't good. And I see a similar thing happening here. Okay. Well, I mean, a white church. What the heck is a white church? White church? I would not think that they would even want that on there.
I would think so too.
You would think an all white church would be a bad thing. You could have all black church and all LGBTQ church.
Right.
well, that's a bar, but you can't have an all white church. You can't have an all white church. So I'm
Then
getting
we've got
really
this one. We've got this abnormally long chalice, and then what looks like the host underneath it says to accountability. And
well,
then we've got all these
who's not in favor of
triangles here.
accountability? Triangles, gender, and LG. Well, there we go. Once again,
Oh, we've got priest
gender,
biases here as well. Priest biases there.
priest biases. Oh, whatever that is.
So these are all bad things, actually. This is gender plus LGBT discrimination, so that's bad. Priest biases.
Now,
basically.
why is hypocrisy misspelled?
Oh my goodness! I just noticed that. Wow.
Well, is it is it as in democracy? Is it a play on words? Is it
I don't
meant
think
to
so.
is it meant to imply that the church is an institutionalized form of hypocrisy, ISY? So they're
No,
going to call it.
because if it was, they would have at least done HY, right? There's no reason to do HI.
Oh, that's true.
I mean, this is
yeah,
bad.
that's just bad. Maybe it's trying to conjure up the idea that this was put together by an 8-year-old.
You notice that hierarchy is also bad. Just the existence of hierarchy at all is bad.
Oh yeah, there you go. Hierarchy. We all know that that's bad.
And I can't read this. Bishop to
present.
Oh, bishop to no, it's priest. Bishop to priest to priest to priest to priest.
What?
More communication.
Yeah,
more communication from bishop to bishop. Oh, okay. So the path to this giant monolith of, bad things is
clericalism.
Bishop to priest to I don't even know what is happening. So
so what we need instead is a giant hand holding up a giant host over an oversized chalice next to all those buzzwords. Well, hey, thanks for that. That's a first on my YouTube videos that I've actually I that was cool. I got to learn how to do all that. And did you have all that artwork like on your desktop and you just sort of fed it in there? And
no, I just searched it while we were talking about
it. So you searched it on the internet and it was there. You went to the synod.va. But to get serious now, but I'm glad we did that so that, at least some people just listen to this, but for those viewing, you could get a sense of what it is that we're talking about, because not everybody has seen this kitschy art. And as I said, I think it's deliberate.
Our art is also a very strong word for what we just saw, Larry. Very, very strong word.
What would you call it instead of art? Just simply
I would call it sort of like progressive kitsch.
Yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah.
And now to get very serious about this, there are those who would say that people like you and I are just, we're being too hard on the Pope. We're being too hard on the Vatican. We're dissenting from the magisterium here, that we're attacking a straw man. You tell me, you look at that art and you read the verbiage and the word salad that we read in the one thing, and then tell me that there's not something wrong here.
That's right.
Tell me that we're wrong to be concerned about the synodal way as simply a way of baptizing a kind of populist, modern, highly secularized Catholicism, and calling it the movement of the Holy Spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And I've written about this. One of the problems that I have with all these listening sessions and then the questionnaires that were sent out.
We don't know the results. Is that where you're going?
Well, number one, we don't really know the results, because even though they supposedly came from the people,
right?
The results have been carefully curated by people in a very small bubble of authority, people who are in charge of the synod. And that's a stacked deck right there. Mm-hmm. In fact, there are people, I think it was in Philadelphia, who were young people who were at some of these synod meetings, who, when they read the official results of their meeting, said, wait a minute, things have been airbrushed out of this. There were a lot of conservative traditionalist voices that were raised at the listening sessions, and none of that made it into the final report. So one is therefore justified in wondering if these things aren't being curated in very tendentious and selective ways to create a foregone conclusion. But the other thing that I would like to point out is this: none of these synodal questionnaires or listening sessions are following the well-established social science protocols that are out there for doing scientific polls. In other words, you can't do these unscientific, impressionistic, heavily curated sort of sessions and questions, and then say this is the Holy Spirit speaking.
Exactly.
And even if it was an accurate form of poll taking via Pew or Gallup and using their sorts of methods, you still don't have an accurate sense of what the Holy Spirit is saying, because the Holy Spirit isn't a democratic poll
Exactly.
from a wide section of the population. That's not what the census fidelium means. So, and yet a lot of the literature coming out about the synod from the official synod people is that we're walking with the Holy Spirit here.
That's right.
We're just listening to the Spirit. That's all we're doing. And that's concerning, because apparently the Spirit is contradicting things that the Spirit said 50 years ago. So
Yep.
Spirit's kind of being a little incoherent here, if you ask me.
Yeah, that's right. One of the many, many problems. I mean, people at the highest levels of the church proceed as if the church is a democracy, like you just mentioned.
Yeah.
That the way for us to determine the right future for the church, the future that God wants the church to have, whatever form God takes, because many people at the highest levels of the church don't actually have a real faith in the crucified Christ. But they believe the way to sort of discern the way forward is to run opinion polls, and that's essentially what the synod is. It's a giant. I mean, also I could have shared on the synod website. There's a diagram that really shows all the steps of the synod, and it's just a big super election. But in reality, the church is not a democracy, Larry. The church is a monarchy, and Jesus Christ is the king. And that monarchy is supported by an aristocracy, and that aristocracy is that evil hierarchy that we saw in that graphic just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, hierarchy.
Yeah, and that aristocracy is supposed to be her bishops, the church's bishops, led by the vicar of Christ, the sort of viceroy, if you will, of the king. And that is how the church is supposed to be ruled. I think what's happened here is the bishops have just simply abdicated. And there's really three flavors of that abdication. One of them is a straight up sort of they no longer believe abdication, right? I no longer believe in the cause of the king, and I'll sort of help to foment a popular insurrection. That's the worst kind. I think the second kind of abdication is a sort of apathy, maybe a de facto atheism. So I'll go through the motions, and sure, I guess I kind of believe, but I don't really believe enough to do anything about it. And then the third kind is just one of, I think, cowardice, and I'll sort of, I'll adopt a policy of retrenchment. We'll pull back, we'll batten down the hatches, and we'll sort of ride this one out. And this one could be, this synod process. It could be this papacy, whatever the case is. But those are the three sort of abdications that we see among the bishops in the church today. And I think that, for me, is one of the most frustrating things. I mean, I mentioned I'm a young layman, convert, father of young children. My wife and I have 5 children. We're raising these kids as best we can, Larry, to try to have a vibrant, living faith in the crucified Christ. And we're doing our very best we can, but it's very hard to do that when you're not supported by your clergy. It's very hard to do that when you're, for example, in a place like I am in the Archdiocese of Chicago, where Cardinal Supich has just allowed all sorts of tomfoolery to go on unpunished and undisciplined in his archdiocese. And he is one of these people who has carried out at least one of these abdications. I think the kindest thing we can say about him is one of those 3 abdications, that either he's too cowardly to do anything about the change that he sees happening, that he has fallen victim to this sort of de facto atheism where he doesn't, he sort of believes, but he doesn't believe strongly enough to do anything about it practically, or he's just actively going along with all of the secularization and saying, yeah, we definitely need to change this because the truths of the faith that the faithful hold are not actually true, and we need to really be more open to the secular powers that be. Now, you might ask, what's the motivation there? I think it can vary, but it could be simply as simple as secularization is powerful, and the pulls of the world, the flesh, and the devil are very powerful. And we have this dialogue about the right side of history. We sort of do this. My friend Andrew Petitprint, who's on my podcast with me every week, complained to me the other day about this sort of the anthropomorphic terms we use to talk about history, as if history is sort of a living being, right? And we always want to be on the right side of history because we don't want history to look back at us askance
that's right.
and say that we were
That's
wrong.
right.
And so I
Yeah.
think these cardinals, like perhaps Supich, although I should always qualify that I don't know this man's heart. I only see his actions, and there are many of them that sort of contribute to a picture of him. But for him, I think it may be as simple as I don't want to be on the wrong side of history. I don't want history to judge me as the cardinal who held back the advancement of the church and inclusion and diversity and multiculturalism, et cetera. Now, all those things obviously are good, Larry. I mean, I don't want people to think I'm just, and your listeners probably won't, but I'm not a stick in the mud who says multiculturalism is bad and diversity is bad and inclusion is bad. Of course not. But those things are
Those are code.
Trojan. They're code. They're Trojan horses for
Yeah.
for values and ideas and ideologies that are completely antithetical to the gospel of Jesus Christ. And that's the problem I have with so many.
It's
of
just
these
like
bishops.
so many in the artwork we saw.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with dialogue. There's
Right.
nothing wrong with listening. There's nothing wrong with half of the things that they listed on, but
Right.
those are all code.
It's buzzword
It's-
bingo.
Yeah, and it's code for all. And with regard to Supich, you're right. We and others like him, Tobin, McElroy, Wilton Gregory.
Yep.
I mean, to greater or less. And then there are people in Europe, Archbishop Paglia in Rome, and so Paglia, however you pronounce his name.
Mhm.
I think it's a complex question, but I actually believe that the de facto atheism is the best. Whether or not it's conscious or unconscious matters not one bit.
Mhm.
I
That's right.
think what we're dealing with here are people that don't believe in God. Not really, not in any effective way, not in the Christian way. And because if they did, they wouldn't act the way that they do.
That's right.
Because you're right. Cardinal Supich allows for all kinds of shenanigans to go on his diocese. All the while he comes down hard on the traditionalists, right? On the Latin Mass people. Well, that's really seriously. We're going to dialogue. We're going to go to the peripheries, but not with you people. So once again, it bespeaks an agenda. It's a sort of no enemies to the left of me agenda. My only enemies are on the right of me. I don't have any enemies on the left of me. So you can get a crazy priest blessing the congregation with a guitar. Hey, God, we're going to rock as you roll, or whatever. We're going to, whatever it is. He gets away with it. He's not even going to get a slap on the wrist because, well, Father means well. He's just trying to be pastoral. We all know he wouldn't hurt a flea. He was just trying to reach out to his people. What he did was outrageous. Okay. And yet, nothing happens in Supich's Chicago. So I would say this. I think that's more than simply going with the zeitgeist. I think it's there is in other words, a cardinal of a major see like that who would allow that kind of nonsense to go in the Eucharist clearly doesn't believe in the Eucharist.
Right.
Not in the same way that the church believes in the Eucharist. That's for darn sure.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think maybe helpful for your listeners, Larry. These discussions often lead me to a reflection of why I'm here, right?
Yeah.
Why do it at all? Is it these guys who are supposed to be leading the show are clearly abdicating their responsibilities?
Yes,
they're either willfully malicious, or they're cowards, or they're just sort of apathetic and sort of abdicating their responsibilities in their apathy. And that's a tough thing. I mean, I mentioned that I'm a convert. I think that many converts come into the church. I was just emailing with a listener to my podcast the other day who's coming to the church. Thanks be to God. And he's just saying like there's a lot of crazy stuff. So I guess we'll really we'll really find out very quickly if this really is the church that she claims to be. And I believe she is. So I'm becoming Catholic. And I thought that stance was very admirable to put his money where his mouth is. But coming from Protestantism, it's very, very common to wrestle with this question of authority. You're Protestant and you say, well, who defines Scripture? Who decides what Scripture is saying? We've got this passage that's really difficult to untangle, and these people use it to argue for infant baptism, and these people use it to argue against infant baptism, and what do we do with that? Right? And so as a Protestant who doesn't have that structure of authority, even as an Orthodox Christian to some degree, the Catholic Church is attractive because there's a place where the buck stops. There's a place at the very top, and you can point to that and say, wow, no matter how hard secularism, the storm of secularism lashes at the door, we've stayed strong, and the Catholic Church still proclaims timeless truths about God's plan for human sexuality, for example. The Catholic Church still proclaims timeless truths about the identity of the human person and our eternal destiny, our eschatological destiny, right? And that's true. But then you get into the church and you start to go through the actual liturgies of the church, and you're raising your kids in the church and you're participating in the life of the church. And you start to realize things are a lot more complicated than that, right? In practice, it's nice and tidy to see kind of like Catholic answers talk about how the Pope has never issued a fallible statement, or never issued an erroneous statement, etc. Right? They're all infallible, etc. And it's nice to sort of have that, like, that, I don't want to call it naive, but I guess overly simple view of church authority. But then you come into the church and you're like, okay, it's actually not this simple. There's an awful lot of stuff going on there. There's an awful lot of problems. And that can be discouraging, because you get here and you're like, wow, is this the right church? So I think maybe a couple reflections for me, and then we can wrap, Larry, if you need to go or whatever. But some things that I found helpful. One, if this is the church that Christ founded, we would expect her to be under attack from all sides. That includes within and without, from the outside and from the inside, at all times, in all places. That's exactly what we've seen happen. It is naive to get into the church and think, wow, every priest is on the good side. Every bishop is on the good side. Jesus himself spoke of the wheat and the tares. Jesus himself clearly knew about betrayers in his midst. Jesus himself had a betrayer in his midst, that was Judas, and he knew about it. And
even Peter betrayed him.
That's true. Yeah, exactly. And he let these guys continue to be around him and do ministry with him. And up until the very end, right? There was the Last Supper for Judas, and for Peter, up through the very end. Peter betrayed him, and obviously Jesus still kept Peter in charge of the church.
Maybe betray is too strong a word. Denied him, at least.
Yeah,
publicly denied him.
Every denial is a betrayal of sorts. It certainly wasn't on the scale of Judas's.
I'm just trying to distinguish his sin from Judas's, which probably was worse anyway.
Yeah, but both mortal, so
yeah.
But so that's one thing, right? That if this is the church that Christ founded, she will be under attack at all times, and we would be naive, honestly, to expect anything less than that. So there is some way in which the constant attacks against the church, the constant sort of the constant lashing of the doors of secularism against the church, the constant ad hominem attacks of prominent Catholics, the constant attacks on prominent Catholics, even from within the church, those would all be actually expected in the true church, and in some ways, could actually be an indication that the church is onto something, that this is actually something real that we have here. A second thing is the words of Jesus himself. I think we do obviously need to remember, in light of the truths of Vatican II, that Jesus is the center of everything. And someone came to me the other day asking sort of how I sort of came to a philosophical understanding of the truth of Catholicism. And one of the things I said is, I think you really just need to read the Gospels. Just start with the Gospel of John, just read through and get a sense of Jesus the person, who is the God man, because this person is unlike any person who's ever lived before. And reading the Gospels will give you a good window into that. And one of my favorite sort of vignettes to talk about in light of the church's troubles is Matthew chapter 18, where Jesus warns the disciples about causing a little one to sin. And until I was Catholic, I had always read that as a Protestant and glossed over the exact context and thought Jesus is just giving a sermon to the public out here, and he's saying, be kind to little children. A chapter or two later, he says, let the little children come to me. So I was like, this is just a theme. He's just saying, don't ever cause a little one to sin, or you'll be in big trouble. And then I realized after I became Catholic that he's not talking to the public. This isn't a homily for the general public. He's talking to his disciples. He's talking to his closest associates, and he's warning them against causing a little child to sin. I mean, that's remarkable, that he is talking to these men who have been with him in his public ministry for, at this point, years, and he's saying them sternly. He's sternly admonishing them: do not cause one of these little ones to sin. Do not be a stumbling block to these little ones. And those are the folks who are the predecessors of our current bishops, who I think are causing little ones to stumble all the time, right? I'm a little one metaphorically, right? Because I'm one of the little children in the church. I'm one of their flock. Well, and so he's giving this warning, and I think that's a really remarkable thing.
Well, I think that's why we've to be kind to the traditionalists. I think that's why we've seen such a rise, such an explosion of traditionalism, especially over the past 10 years. Because what you have are formerly sort of just conservative Catholics of a JP2 Benedict sort, who had been red pilled by, Pope Francis.
Yep.
And that drove them further away. But you're a convert, and like you said, the issue of authority is big. I would direct my viewers. Do you know who Michael Lofton is, who runs
For sure. Yeah, he's a friend of mine. Yeah, he's been on my show a couple times. Yeah, he's great.
Great. I'm going to be on his show on Thursday.
Cool.
He just had a 3-hour long, not on his show, but on Matt Fradd's show. He had a 3-hour long, you can find it on YouTube, video interview with Matt Fradd. So Matt Fradd and Michael Lofton talking. And it's absolutely magnificent, because I learned all kinds of stuff about Michael Lofton I never knew before, that he was in fact a convert, and that he
Orthodoxy again.
He was a Catholic, and then he went to Orthodoxy, and then back to Catholicism, and all of it revolves around that question of authority.
Yeah,
that question of, okay, so he was an evangelical that came into the faith, the Catholic faith, because he saw it as the rock of Peter.
That's
then
right.
Pope Francis happens, and now all the crazy. It's not just, when we say Pope Francis happens, in my book, I mean, he's valid Pope, all that kind of stuff. And everything he says, I think, can be interpreted in a perfectly orthodox way. The issue is who he has empowered.
Yes.
Who he has put in, who's doing the artwork for the synod, right, is the
That's
product of who he is and put in charge of the synod and things like that. Okay. So that's kind of what affected Michael Lofton, right? And so he drifts off into orthodoxy. Well, he gets to orthodoxy and realizes, well,
this is a mess.
It's a mess over here, and they have the same authority issues. So he finally comes back. Now, I haven't finished watching the whole 3 hours. I just saw the first half of it, and then I had to come on here to do this with you. But I only bring it up so my viewers, if they want to do a deep dive into that issue, I please go watch the Michael Lofton interview with Matt Fradd. I think it's excellent. But it raises all those same issues that you raise.
It's
authority.
Fradd's a better interviewer than I, so if you have the time, go to that one. But there's a shorter one. I interviewed Michael on my show, Creedle, probably a year and a half ago or so, and he gives a condensed version of that same journey. Remarkable.
Well, then, okay, people should go. If people don't want to watch, I might go watch yours now, because I don't necessarily want to watch another hour and a half of the Matt Fradd one. 3 hours. I mean, I'm known for doing 1.5 hour long podcasts like this one. Sure. Looks like it's going to be, but 3 hours I think is too. Of course, you can break it up into sections.
He did a 5 hour one the other day, and I was just like, wow, that is some impressive stamina. I mean, I think I would at least need a bathroom break in the 5 hour window. That's crazy.
Yeah, you would think. Yeah, you would think. But the all I would say, to my viewers are constant, because I have pointed out in my blogs, that the fact of the matter is Pope Francis doesn't unsettle my faith.
Yeah.
Doesn't drive me into orthodoxy. I lived through this before, but also because a deep awareness of church history, and I don't just mean the shenanigans of this or that pope who had children out of wedlock or whatever. If you study the doctrinal history of Catholicism, her councils and so forth, then it becomes clear that the church has made mistakes in the past in its non-infallible teaching and its non-infallible teachings, but it has made some mistakes, and not just minor ones. There were some pretty significant, like it's okay to burn heretics at the stake. Pope Leo X taught that. He condemned the idea put forward by Martin Luther that it is not of the Holy Spirit to burn heretics at the stake. Martin Luther said you shouldn't burn heretics at the stake. That's contrary to the Holy Spirit. Pope Leo condemns that idea.
Just depends on how bad the heresy is.
And he condemns it in the strongest terms. Yeah, maybe really bad heresies, we can at least put a match under their feet or something.
Right.
I don't know, or pinch their ear until they cry uncle. But you get my point. All right, and we can multiply. I don't want to exaggerate that. I'm not trying to say, oh my God, the church is a train wreck of mistakes. I'm not saying that. But the idea, and that's why you mentioned at the beginning of this, the hermeneutic of continuity, and we all accept the hermeneutic of continuity, but Pope Benedict also modified that, said, well, we need to also talk about the hermeneutic of reform, which, because every single council is going to engage in some micro ruptures
That's right.
with the past. So the overarching theme is continuity, but within that continuity, there might be little adjustments,
Yep.
ecclesial chiropractic adjustments to the church's spinal doctrinal. Okay, I'm not going to push that metaphor, but you get the point. So example, Vatican
Chiropractic
II,
adjustment. Yeah.
yeah, ecclesial chiropractic adjustments. All right, so we go from Leo condemning the idea that that it's okay to burn condemning the idea that you shouldn't burn heretics at the stake. All right, and affirming that is of the Holy Spirit, to Vatican II saying every human being has a basic human right to religious freedom, because faith cannot be coerced, and truth has a constitutive orientation to freedom, and freedom to truth. Now, Dignitatis Humanae at the council did not say we can't have confessional states. It did not say that governments don't have an obligation to seek the truth of religion. It affirmed that those things are true. But it said, even if we have a Catholic state, a Catholic government, which is not going to happen here, but even so, you still have to have religious freedom.
Right. You can't coerce.
I don't care how you spin that. That's a reversal of Leo X, okay, who's saying you don't have religious freedom. If you're a heretic and you're obstinately so, for your good, to avoid you from going to hell, we're going to burn you at the stake. Now, that's a change in teaching. Okay, and so what I'm asking people to consider, right, before they run off with their hair on fire to orthodoxy or back to Protestantism, all right, just sit back and ask yourself the question: of all the shenanigans going on in the church today, how many of them really rise to the level of a major, like, rupture of a huge apostasy or something? I don't see it. Do you see it? I mean,
no.
There are things
we'll see how things go with the synod, but
yeah, maybe they'll get a little. The worst thing that would happen, in my opinion, is that they're going to modify moral theology in some unfortunate ways.
Yep.
So they're not going to deny any doctrines, but they're going to advance this idea that moral doctrines have to be
pastoral accompaniment.
Yeah, they have to be lived and subjectively appropriated. And pastoral accompaniment means you can give a wink and a nod to cohabitation or gay sex or whatever. That's how this is going to go down. But I don't see that the church is going to change her teaching on the Trinity or Christology, or the sacraments. Right. None of the major creedal elements of the faith are going to. So, in other words, my point is, just as Seinfeld, just serenity now, serenity now, serenity now.
One more thing, if I can add to my two brief reflections on sort of whether we go from here. Another thing that I take great comfort in, like you said, serenity now. Things could go really, really far south tomorrow, and history is not over. God is still doing something here. The God is doing a new thing is sort of one of these taglines of the synod, and they use it to suggest that sort of if God maybe wants to sort of change his mind on some things, but obviously not. But God is always doing a new thing because God is constantly recreating. And I think one of the positives from Vatican II, regardless of you have to sort of acknowledge, regardless of your position on Vatican II, one of the things that has happened, and I think it's a positive, is that it has created a class of the laity. This isn't all the laity by any means, but it's a class of the laity that is highly motivated, highly engaged, and highly committed to the truths of Christ and his church. And so they think of like focused missionaries on campuses all across America, and now in South America and in Europe, doing amazing work, recruiting college students and evangelizing, doing the hard work of ministry. I know tons of seminarians now who are young, they're traditional, they're on fire for their faith, they're dissatisfied with their bishops just like we are, and they're in the pipeline to become priests. I know lots of families like my own, young moms and dads who are having lots of kids and really committed to raising them in the church. And I don't know if all of that stuff would have happened if Vatican II hadn't happened. Now, maybe we have to acknowledge that's part of just a counter reaction to the sort of spirit of Vatican II. But if so, fine. That's not outside of the providence of the Holy Spirit. And maybe, maybe in addition to these profound theological truths that the council advocated, the Holy Spirit is using this sort of nebulous spirit of Vatican II zeitgeist to actually raise up in a counter reform an army of lay people and clergy who are ready to carry on the work of the new evangelization well into the next century. And that's what gets me excited. It's going to be a small subset. It's going to be in the words of Benedict the 16th, in maybe one day Saint Benedict the 16th. It's going to be a smaller, purer church, but it's going to be there, and it's going to be advancing the cause of Christ crucified. And I'm really excited about that, because it's going to happen, and I've total faith in that based on what I see now, and based on the fact that Christ will never abandon his church, and she will prevail.
Yeah, I can't add anything to that. I mean, that's it. It's sort of the irony of the universal call to holiness of Vatican II and the empowering of the laity, is that will happen because the laity are reacting against what many perceive to be the reforms of the Second Vatican Council.
Exactly.
Which I don't think is true, but that is, we are seeing a re-energized laity. And to get serious, the fact is the council called for that, and that's what we have. So sometimes I think that we often exaggerate the failures of post-conciliar Catholicism. Well, a lot of metrics have gone down, yes, but they've gone down in a lot of religions. But I would say Catholicism is still in a lot better shape than a lot of other Christian denominations.
Well, I think we need to distinguish between the failure of post-conciliar Catholicism and the failure of the council. And I was talking to my wife about this.
Yeah, well, yeah,
based
absolutely.
On the Dalton's article, right?
Like, well, that's not what we were saying at the beginning of our conversation here. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so I think we can say, post-conciliar Catholicism is an absolute mess. It's a train wreck. But the council is still, like, the jury's still out, And we're seeing the fruits of the council in ways that we weren't seeing even 10 years ago. All these lay movements and lay apostolates coming up, and it's going to be a different looking church, I think, in a good way, smaller, purer, more on fire in 10, 20, 30 years.
Yeah, the council is already a success in the sense that the theology that it promoted is profoundly true, and probably the most radical recentering of the church around Christ that we've seen in a long, maybe since St. Francis of Assisi and the reforms of the mendicants. And that will be its lasting legacy. But that's, as you said, it's going to take time. Yeah. It might be 20 years from now, 30 years from now, when we see
100 years, yeah.
100 years, when we see the full fruit of the theological concepts. That's the problem, that the church has not caught up to the theology of the council. Right. I mean, progressives think, oh, you're right, we need to get going here with our progressive. Because you got the council all wrong. Yeah. And so, and I'm encouraged. You mentioned seminarians. We just hosted on the farm 3 seminarians from St. Charles Seminary in Philadelphia over the weekend that came to the farm to help out. Really great guys, very traditional. Mm-hmm. They love the Latin Mass. They love the Novus Ordo, though, too. Yeah. Very grounded guys. They're not angry at all. Anger is not the right word. They're deeply and profoundly disappointed in their shepherds, and determined to do something about it. And it's not just young seminarians. It's people like you, it's people like me, it's other lay people that are out there. Look at this explosion of podcasts and videos from, from lay Catholics. My friend, Facebook friend, I've never met, Dr. Peter Kwasniewski, who's like I don't know if you know Dr. Peter. I know
of him. Yeah, I don't know.
He's like a massive Latin Mass guy. He runs all over the world giving, and he's pretty good at that. And I lost my train of thought. I forgot what I was.
Just this movement revitalized.
I was going to say, and I've said to Peter, look, because he's often highly critical of the Second Vatican Council. And I say, Peter, the fact of the matter is you're a living testimony to at least one of the successes of the council. You realize, of course, before the council, there were no lay theologians in the church. I mean, you found an occasional Dietrich von Hildebrand, but most lay people that found their way into theology started as philosophers. Mm-hmm. You could be a lay philosopher in the Catholic Church before the council, but it was unheard of. Do you know most Catholic colleges in the United States before the council did not have theology departments?
I did not know that.
They had philosophy departments. Wow. Theology was in the seminaries. Theology was in the seminaries. You might have in a Catholic college a single theology class or two that an undergraduate would take, that a priest
taught by a priest. Yeah.
But there were no major academic theology departments. really in most Catholic colleges and universities before the council. I didn't realize until I read Joseph Pieper, the philosopher, his memoirs, and he was talking about how he came to the United States and he was shocked and surprised to see that this was true. But it was the council. It was because of the council. Now, I say that, and then immediately it pops into my head, heck, maybe even if there wasn't a council, you would have seen a movement of lay people into theology as the immigrant Catholic Church of the United States become a more mainstream and upper middle class church. You might find then Catholics who want to get educated in theology. Who knows? Who knows? But that's certainly what the council called for, and it's what we got. So,
well, if I could put my tinfoil hat on for just a moment too, I wonder, Larry, if this kind of renewed impetus from the Holy See for this this Synod of Synods is being carried out with a great awareness that in the background there's this very soft ticking, tick, 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 because this is not going to be the way the church looks forever. And as we've said, these seminaries are bursting. I mean, it's not like we have a surplus of seminaries in the U.S. now, but elsewhere in the world that is the case. I was talking with a Carmelite priest who was teaching in Tanzania. He said this one diocese has 60 ordinations every year in Tanzania. And these are very traditional, on fire, zealous priests. And that's a story, maybe not everywhere in the world, but there's a lot of stories like that in the world. and that's the future of the priesthood. That's I think the future of the Catholic Church. Now, again, it's going to be smaller. It's secularism is still going to be a problem. Postmodernism is an even bigger problem potentially. Yeah. But the church is going to be there, and the church is going to be fine.
But that smaller church, as Ratzinger predicted in 1967 in his famous interview, right? That smaller church is going to be a holier church, a more intentional church. And this, right. I have a book coming out in the spring with Ignatius Press. It's called Confessions of a Catholic Worker. And it's essentially making the case that many others have made, that the Catholicism of the future, and it goes back to Ratzinger's idea, is going to have to be an intentional Catholicism or it won't be. Right. It simply won't be. Because of the cultural headwinds that we face, cultural Catholicism is dead. Constantinian Catholicism is dead. Casual, middle-of-the-road, fence-riding Catholicism, our kids aren't buying that. If you want to see why young people are hemorrhaging out of the church, it's because a previous generation before them, the fence-sitting lukewarm Catholics stayed in the church. However lukewarm it was, they stayed in the church. Young people today, they're not. There aren't, and this is bringing home the truth of this insight. All right, that Ronner's old thing, the Christian of the future is going to have to be a mystic, or he won't be at all. And C.S. Lewis's point: we're all spiritually in this day and age like eggs. We either have to hatch or go bad. Right. They all have this central. Balthasar called it the Ernstfall. All right, the moment of crisis, and this is what Ratzinger is writing a lot about. Crisis. My friend Father Harrison Ayers, who does the clerical speaking podcast. Yeah, he's writing his dissertation on Ratzinger, and we were talking about this today, about Ratzinger's emphasis on crisis. So it's going to be a smaller church, but it's going to be, the ones that are left are going to be people that get it. Exactly. And they're going to be ones who are going to respect and honor tradition. So I agree with your tinfoil hat, tick, 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 that the people this is their last gasp, because they realize that their version of Catholicism is dying. And I think you see some, I can't remember the name of the diocese, but there's a successful diocese in southwestern France, I think. I can't remember the name of it. The bishop there is a very traditional bishop. He's not a radical traditionalist, but he leans traditional. Sure. And he's really empowered the Latin Mass in his diocese. And he's got seminarians bursting at the seams, ordinations bursting at the seams, but all the young priests and so forth are of this more traditional type. Do you know, this past year, the Vatican sent an official visitation to his diocese to analyze what's going wrong there, and have now issued it's unprecedented. Absolutely unprecedented. The Vatican has suppressed their ordinations for this year. The Vatican has told this bishop, hey, whatever happened to synodality, by the way? The Vatican has now intervened and ordered this bishop not to ordain any priest this year. Wow. They didn't give any reasons why. None whatsoever. They just said, well, we're in the midst of our study of your diocese, so we just think it's best that you don't ordain anybody this year. That goes with your tinfoil hat theory that there's a tick, tick, tick here. And it goes along with Traditionis Custodes in the suppression of the Latin Mass. There's enough evidence piling up here, I think, now that to say, I don't think it's tinfoil hat at all.
Yeah.
Zach, I think it's absolutely true. A lot's going to ride on who the next pope is, I think.
For sure. That bishop, I'm pretty sure, I mean, he would get in trouble with the Vatican, but he could do valid ordinations, right? Despite the Vatican's prohibition, right?
Oh yeah, but he's trying to be, an
he's
obedient son of
Marcel Lefebvre.
yeah, trying to be an obedient son of the church.
It's good.
And go along with it. And after all, he is teaching his seminarians a valuable lesson in ecclesial obedience by telling the ones who are up for ordination this year, well, next year.
Yeah.
You'll be ordained next year, hopefully, or maybe the year after. I mean, we are to remember, they're not the first. Padre Pio was silenced. Henry de Lubac was silenced. Excuse me, I'm getting over a respiratory thing, so I do have a bit of a cough here. I apologize. So yeah, I mean, this kind of thing does happen in the church, although I've never seen ordination suppressed like this. But I do think there's a tick, tick, tick.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind.
None. Well, do you have any, what time is it? Well, we've been going at this for a while. We don't want to pull a Matt Fred 5-hour conversation here.
No, this was great though. I appreciate it. If I can give a plug, I've got a new show on my feed. So the feed's called Creedal, Creedal, but I do a new show on Thursdays with Andrew Petiprin, who's the Word on Fire Fulton Sheen.
I did an interview with Andrew once.
Right.
Well, he actually interviewed me from Science and Religion, something or other.
Yep. Yeah. Andrew's great. He's become a very close friend of mine. He and I have a lot of common interests. But so we do a weekly show called What a Week, and we talk about, it's not strictly theology. It's all through a theological lens. We do a lot of different topics. So that's a fun one.
And I have watched every one, and I can tell my viewers it's fantastic.
Well, thank you very much.
Because both you guys are articulate and you have a sense of humor. I love Andrew. It's good stuff. So absolutely, I'm glad you plugged that. What's it called again?
What a Week.
What a Week. That's right. What a Week. I love that. The first time I saw it, I thought, okay, they're just going to talk about this week and that's going to be it. But no, it's every week. It's like, what a week.
Exactly.
That's a great idea.
Well, the story behind that name is that we were just bandying about various names and just couldn't find one that sticks. And so I was like, well, for the first week, let's just go with What a Week, because we can't figure out a better name. And then it kind of worked. So it just started rolling off the assembly line like that.
No, I think it's great. I think it's great. So yeah, everybody go watch What a Week and Creedal, get Hallow, and just keep the faith, folks. Keep the faith. There's a lot of controversy and stuff, but this too shall pass.
Indeed.
And it is. Well, we'll end with there was the famous prayer of Saint Pope John the 23rd that he said every night before he went to bed. He said, "Lord, I'm tired. It's your church. I'm going to bed."
Beautiful.
I'm going to bed.
I love these stories of the simple faith of St. John the 23rd. He seems great. I wish I could have met him.
Oh, yeah.
Missed him by,
me too.
50, 60 years.
All right, everyone. Thank you. A big thank you to Zach for a far-ranging and sometimes raucous and interesting conversation where yours truly, your humble leader of this was ranting and raving for a bit. So apologies to anybody I might have offended along the way. All right. Thanks, everybody. And we're going to stop recording.